I think that sexual education is so important. Like, I think it is so incredibly important. I have a few fears around certain types of institutionalized sexual education because I think schools are notoriously bad at sexual education. And so I get nervous about also including into that the idea of like pleasure. And one of the things I was talking about is like the website included like sex positions and things like that. And I think schools do a really, like I just can't imagine my like 70-year-old gym teacher talking about the nuance of female pleasure, or like the female orgasm. Like that literally makes me cringe and want to die. But do I think the website should exist? 100%. Do I think that like people should have access to that education? Oh, totally, totally, totally. Do I think like schools are good at that? No, they're really bad. If they got better at it, then I'd be like, yeah, include some like pleasure stuff in there. But now I'm like, no.
Go ahead.
I feel like schools, man, they shouldn't. How are they gonna teach us how to have pleasurable sex when they can't even teach us how to have a pleasurable time in class? Like, man, like before you teach me how to do cartwheels and backflips when I'm having sex, why don't you teach me how to clean my room? Like, why don't you teach me how to invest? Why don't you teach me how to manage my money? There's way more important things that they could teach us.
I do have fear around them, like, who teaches, because I say schools are notorious bad, okay, but parents are also notoriously bad.
And so this is the thing, because
hold on. Let's hear what Christian has. No, let's hear what Christian has to say.
Okay, thanks. Here's my thing about sexual education. Like, first of all, it seems as though most of it is dedicated to what you can't do and scaring students. Like big scary pictures of STIs and don't do this and don't do that, don't ever think about this. To the point where it's almost like you're expecting these students who, like, I started sex ed when I was in grade 5. You're expecting them to have a certain amount of like prerequisite background knowledge. When you're 5, there is no prerequisite knowledge. Okay, at a certain point, I think this is actually a good thing to have in schools, because if you tell people what not to do all the time, human nature is that you're just going to tune out. It's better to teach from the affirmative, and so I think this in moderation could work.
You know, I have a unique opinion on this, because I think, like, you know, everyone talks about how their first time was trash, and I think maybe talking about like some sex positions and like maybe like, oh, the clitoris is a good place to be around. I think it's important for people to understand, okay, not to be able to identify you have syphilis or you have an STI, but say like, that's a clitoris. That feels good. Maybe let's try that. So I'm all for it, just on the fact of being able to have a better first time.
Okay, but I feel like, okay, but my big fear too here is like, we know that like sexual education is always, like, tends to be incredibly heteronormative and incredibly like cis-normative, and that's like my other big fear. Is like the idea of sitting in a classroom and having us go over sex positions and only being for like heterosexual cisgender couples is just like so cringeworthy. I want to like not deal with that.
And we have a tweet to back that up. Austin, using hashtag #MySide, thank you, says that I think that basic sex ed in grade 8 is, well, but once you get to high school in grade 9, you should start to learn about pleasure.
Maybe that's better in
That's
high school.
That's not a bad division, actually.
And the thing is, in theory, I so badly want it to be in school, in theory, but then I always like wonder in practice. My gym teacher was so cringeworthy.
But I just think that like every human being is different, and everybody gets pleasure differently.
Yeah,
so what are they really gonna teach us about pleasure? Like, you can read as many books and many textbooks as you want, but there's no difference in actually doing. Once you're actually having sex with someone, it's a totally different story.